Okay, well, with that, without much further ado, I would like to hand the floor to Aditya.
Perfect. Hello all, good afternoon and welcome today to this seminar. So we are going to present a paper known as Different Shades of Green, where we use the natural language processing to estimate the green bond premium in the primary markets. So which is written by my colleague Nal Mishra and myself. So let's start. Next slide, please. So the paper is briefly as follows. The presentation will have introduction to the topic, then the literature review, which we have done. Then we're going to present our methodology and finally discuss the results with you. So let's start with the introduction. So as we all know, green bonds are the financial instruments that are used to finance sustainable sources, like for example, investments in renewable energy or any sort of green projects, which will help sustainable development or which will be environmentally friendly. So now we have a big question: how greenness of bonds based on non-financial disclosures impact financial savings. So we all know that just by saying that this bond is green, we will have some different perceptions, or the investors will look at it from a different perspective, that oh, it's there for a specific cause and we should treat it differently from the normal bonds issued by corporates, say for like debt for running the business. So how greenness of bonds affects financial disclosures is our primary theme of this paper. So we study the cost savings in the primary market. So we basically analyze from the issuer perspective for green bonds. We do the contextual analysis of non-financial disclosures using natural language processing techniques to estimate how green are the bonds, and does that have an impact on the financial aspects of those instruments. So we start by generating a green score, and using this green score, we estimate how much premium do they attribute, or are they having less premium as compared to normal bonds. So we can proceed to the next slide. So now we start with the related literature. Existing literature has primarily focused on finding evidence of green premium in primary and secondary markets. So here, most of the literature which we have around now has dealt with the issue that whether just attributing a bond as green helps it, or does it create some differential attributes to the yield, coupon rate, etc. in primary as well as secondary market. So one of the primary literatures is like Macaskill et al., who have performed a systematic literature review of existing studies for primary and secondary markets. And they find that about 56% of the existing literature says that yes, there is existence of green premium in the primary markets, and 70% says that in secondary markets. Then the primary literature which proves the existence of green premium as compared to conventional bonds is by Baker et al., Preclaw and Bakshi and Selby. We have relied on these papers and extended our analysis further. So the existing literature by these authors suggests that there is existence of green premium in primary markets as well as secondary markets, but they don't really talk on how the greenness of bonds in itself affect the premium in these markets. Further, Harrison, Hachenberg et al., they suggest that there is a premium pricing for green bonds. That is, green bonds are issued at higher prices or trade at higher prices as compared to normal bonds in primary as well as secondary market. Another interesting point is that the existence of a third-party certification or audit results in lower bond yields for the primary market. Third-party certification is essentially like a third party certifies that the bond, the issued green bond is adhering to green principles and is based on one of the different aspects of green principles issued by ICMA. So now we head to the methodology. Next slide, please. Okay, so the results in brief. As I introduced earlier, we have linked green premium to the greenness of bonds based on their green scores. We find that greenness of bonds has higher impact on green premium as compared to third-party certification. So in addition to finding evidence of green premium, we go one step further and say that green premium is also dependent on how green the bonds are. And for assessing how green these bonds are, we use natural language processing to understand what non-financial disclosures they are reporting. So the non-financial disclosures we are referring to is specifically the green principles or the projects or the details which the issuers provide in their prospectus and other related issue documents of how they are going to use the proceeds of these issues, which projects are they going to invest. This gives a brief idea about whether the projects are really sustainable projects, or what degree of projects are being used by the issuers to invest. Further, after we find that the existence of green premium is there in the primary market, we go one step further to find whether it's in form of savings or price premium on issue. So our research suggests that it's more evident in form of savings and interest costs. Because we are analyzing it from a primary market, savings and interest costs for green bond issuers is the key perspective. The final part of our study deals with common issuers. That is, there are several issuers. Those may be corporates, governmental organizations, supranational entities, which have green as well as normal bond issues. Now, we have analyzed specifically these issuers to see whether they get a higher premium or lower premium for their green bonds. Further, by issuing both the type of bonds, there might be some spillover effects of green bond issues on the normal bond issues and vice versa. So in the last part, we also try to analyze the existence of some spillover effects. Next slide, please. So now, first we have to determine how green the bonds are. For that, we have to develop a greenness score. So we use the natural language processing techniques to analyze the non-financial disclosures. Specifically, we perform a sentiment analysis of intended use of proceeds using NLP to find the degree of closeness. So how close is the literature given in the issue documents like prospectus, green bond principles, prospectus or the green documentation with the green bond principles issued by ICMA. For this project, we have used green bond principles issued by ICMA version 2021 as the benchmark. So the standard use of proceeds that have been given in those principles are considered to be benchmark, and we have analyzed how close to the intended uses mentioned in the issue documents for all the different green bonds are with the green bond principles. So using pre-trained word embeddings, we convert each word into a unique vector representation. Then we combine it into a sentence vector and a document vector using weighted average measures. This degree of closeness is converted into green score, and for that we have used cosine similarity between document vectors. Next slide, please. So there are different approaches in NLP which are available to us. There are some traditional approaches like TF-IDF, word to vec, doc to vec, glove, bidirectional approach, glove, which have been giving results for sentiment analysis. But we find that BERT or bidirectional encoder representation from transformers, which has been provided by Google, is by far the best approach to do this embedding. The prime reason for that is BERT provides different approaches, so different vectors for same word based on the pre and the post words in the sentence. So just we have provided an example for the word running. He's running a bank and he's running a marathon. These two are different sentences. But the traditional approaches treat running as a single vector or the same vector for both these sentences. However, because BERT analyzes all the words in a sentence and contextually makes out the embedding, it creates different embedding for running in these two sentences. And that's what we want, because just by mentioning different words in the use of proceeds would lead to a false idea of how close the two documents are. So we need to analyze those sentences contextually to see whether they actually mean or actually result in investment in sustainable sources, or if there are some loopholes that might be remaining where entity can direct funds to other types of projects. The formula for the next slide provides a sample picture of how BERT encodes each sentence. So first it converts into word indices, then contextual embedding, and finally it presents a vector for every word. Every word vector, we take sentence vectors and then create a document vector for each individual document, that is the use of proceeds for each individual green bond. Similarly, we have created a embedding for the green bond principles, which is our benchmark, which stays the same. And we analyze the closeness of every document with the benchmark.
Can I interrupt you here, Aditya, for a minute?
Yes, yes, please.
So I would like to tell the audience that we use BERT only till the contextual word embeddings part. And although we are showing the diagram for LSTM and prediction, this is called downstream task in NLP. So we don't really use it for the downstream task for most of our paper. At one point, we do a bit of robustness, which we're not showing in this presentation here, but it's there in the paper, where we use this downstream task and coding of the sentiment in terms of green sentiment as well. But for our major results for today's presentation, we are not using the last bit, that is LSTM, and then going on to prediction part. So sorry, I just wanted to make that clear in case somebody thinks that we are using the entire BERT, including the downstream tasks as such. Sorry, please go ahead.
So now we have contextual word embeddings based on the use of proceeds. Now using this formula of cosine similarity, we identify how close are they with the benchmark. Now this can have a value of 0 to 1, where a value of 1 would imply a perfect alignment with green bond principles. For a robustness check, we also have confirmed that there is no value of 1 except the benchmark, which indirectly means that no issuer has just copied the text from the benchmark. So, next slide, please. So for getting this data, we have specifically relied on Bloomberg, fixed income function, and internet websites of the green bond issuers. We get the green bond subset from the Bloomberg fixed income function and then download the documents which are available on Bloomberg, as well as go to the individual internet websites of green bond issuers and get the prospectus of the bonds, green finance framework, and external review documentation, which is like a third-party certification, if any. For creating document embeddings, we primarily use the prospectus and the green finance framework, from where we have extracted the use of proceeds or the intended use of proceeds of green bonds, where the issuers have stated the type of projects or areas where they are going to invest from the proceeds of the bonds. A general comparison of the use of proceed documents with our benchmark yields that there are around 165 unique words in the green bond principles, whereas around 2,500 unique words in UOP documents. To put it into a perspective, there are the top 200 words in the use of proceeds constitute over 67% of the words, which means that the top 200 words are the key words to focus on. And now from those top 200 words, 67 unique words from the green bond principles are present in top 200, which means that there is a direct matching of those two documents. We have also developed word clouds for the green bond principles as well as use of proceeds, which we have generated based on the frequency of every word. So as you can see, the words like projects, energy, efficiency, renewable have been appearing in the use of proceed documents, which are also present in the green bond principles. Next slide, please. So now to get the data for our empirical analysis, we focus on primary market data, which is available on Bloomberg for green bonds that have been issued and outstanding from 2008 to 2021. The cutoff date is May 1, 2021. Green bonds have been issued by different types of issuers like corporate, government, and supranational entities, as I've mentioned before. It covers like a brief, the green bond set covers over 65 countries as well as 34 currencies of bonds. The key data points that we have collected include price at issue, yield at issue, coupon rate, maturity, duration. So all the basic attributes of the green bonds. Additionally, to compare the green bonds and also dwell into the area of existence of green premium, we downloaded normal bond data set as well. So using this data, we have created 3 data sets, which includes the fixed income data set, which has both the green as well as normal bonds, green bond data set, which obviously has the green bonds, which are identified by Bloomberg. So just I'll let you know that Bloomberg has a self-identifying. So Bloomberg identifies bonds as green based on the inputs given by the issuers. Again, as I have mentioned previously, we have a common issuer data set, which contains both green bonds as well as normal bonds issued by the same issuers. So here we focus on only those issuers which have issued both type of bonds. A quick glance of these 3 data sets, next slide please. We can see that average yield at issue is higher for fixed income data set. That is the data set which has normal bond as well as green bonds, and lower for green bonds, which indicates that there is a lower yield for green bonds as compared to normal bonds. But we have to prove this using an empirical specification and try to establish a relationship with the greenness of bonds. So for that, we have used the following empirical specification. Next slide. So our empirical specification has green premium as our key dependent variable. We use green ID as our key explanatory variable, which might contain green instrument indicator or green score. So green instrument indicator is the identification that whether this bond is green or not, and green score is the unique score which we have developed using the cosine similarity. Now xi and zi have denote the control variables and various fixed effects or combination of fixed effects that we have used in different specification of this baseline equation. So now we will like to go through our results. So are there any questions on the data sets or the empirical equation? Okay, I'll proceed with the results. So first we start with the existence of green premium. So continuing the analysis by different authors as mentioned above, we first provide or try to provide an evidence of existence of green premium. So this equation tells us that if for the green bonds, we have a lower yield at issue as compared to normal bonds. So if an issuer has a green bond, it has over 30.36% lower yield as compared to a normal bond. This equation is run on the fixed income data set, which contains both green and normal bonds. We also use a combination of fixed effects as well as control variables to try and establish that the yield is affected by green, the attribute being a green instrument or not. Further, we can say that these results are in line with all the existing literature or most of the existing literature for primary markets. Next slide, please.
Just one quick question. Sorry, Aditya.
Yes.
The economic significance, you said it's 36 basis point or percent, or what was the unit? It's cheaper at issue?
So it's like 36 basis points or 0.36%.
Okay, 36 basis points. Thank you.
Yep. So we observe that annualized yield at issue is lower for green instruments. So now it could be lower due to interest cost or price on issue. So that would be our next step to establish why we get a lower annualized yield at issue for green bonds as compared to normal bonds. So lower annualized yield indicates a lower return for investors, but a gain or a premium for issuers in the primary market. So green bonds having a lower yield actually benefits the issuers. So now the next question arises whether if by making bonds more and more green, or as our topic focuses, writing more and more green literature, does it have any impact on bond yields? And if yes, it might be beneficial for the issuers. So next slide, please. So here we try and find out whether greener bonds have lower yield at issue. And consistent to our predictions, we find that as the green score increases, that is, as the use of proceeds get closer to the benchmark green bond principles, we see a decrease in the yield at issue or annualized yield at issue for green bonds. Here, an important point is there. The important point to note is there. External certification also has a negative effect on yield at issue. However, the impact of green score or greenness of bond is higher than the external certification, which implies that even though if you have a bond which is certified or has a certificate issued by an auditor or a third party, the attribute of bond being more green results in a lower yield at issue. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, green scores are primary explanatory variable in this equation with external certification, where we find whether premium is based on bond greenness. So we find that annualized yield at issue decreases by over 23 basis points for each 10 points increase in green score, which implies that greener bonds have lower yields, which again benefits the issuers. And
another quick question. In the previous regression, is the ESG rating of the issuer a control variable?
Yes. Can you just go to the previous slide? Yes, as you can see in the second and the fourth specification, we have specifically included the rating fixed effects, which is the bond rating and not the ESG rating.
Yeah. So the reason why I'm asking, when for these green bond investors, sometimes you have a company that has actually a very poor ESG profile, and then they issue a green bond, which could be considered suspicious by investors. So I'm just wondering whether you thought about, or whether it's included, the ESG rating of the issuer as maybe something important to control for. Because I could also imagine when the issuer has an excellent ESG rating, maybe you don't care for the external certification very much. But if the issuer has no ESG rating at all, or maybe a very poor one, then the certification might be more important.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's a good suggestion, and we'll note it down. And so you're saying that the ratings need not, if we have the rating fixed effects, we do not need to worry about the external third-party certification. Is that what your point was? Like in summary?
I think just the ESG rating of the issuer could drive the premium, just as a confounder potentially. So
okay.
Maybe just
yeah. Okay, yeah, it's possible. So that is why we have the rating fixed effects, where I think he clubbed together. That's Aditya mentioned. He put together, similar kind of ratings. I think all A, B, C, whichever category you are in. So for sure, that is definitely a confounder. But this is different from the external third party in some sense. So
it's different. Yeah.
But thanks. Yeah, I agree. So probably maybe 1 and 3 are a bit. 1 and 3 also make sense, but at the same time, it shows you that it might be confounding, but not to that extent, as you see. It's about 20 basis or 30 basis.
20 basis. Yeah.
20 to 30 basis points. It's not that it absorbs all the effects. That's probably.
So is it? Sorry, this is just purely the semantics, but in rating fixed effects, that's where it is actually included, because the ratings might also change over time. Okay.
Yes. So I know ratings could change over time as well, but we can look at that. But I doubt that would be the case, because most of the sample is from 2016 to 2021. In fact, I would say even 2017. In these 3-4 years, I don't know if how many companies would have multiple rating revisions. But rating fixed effects is...
You're right. Not much, probably.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. So,
okay. So, next slide. So next question which we would like to answer is whether the lower annualized yield at issue is caused due to interest expense or due to issuing bonds at higher premium. So we just take the basic formula for yield at issue, which is like, so there are two components. The yield could be lower either because the green bonds are issued at lower coupon rate, or they might be issued at higher prices in the primary market. So this regression analyzes the impact of the interest expenses, which represent a coupon rate or the interest side of the green instruments, where we see that the green score is actually reducing, has a negative and significant coefficient, which implies that as the green score increases, the bonds have a lower interest expense. Because this is in USD million, we say that for each 10-point increase in green score, we get about 0.7 million USD savings in interest costs on green bonds. An interesting observation is that the interest cost is not affected by the external certification. So primarily here we are trying to say that for greener bonds, you will have lower interest costs. And to ensure the robustness of our specification, we have also included different control variables on entity level basis, which might have an impact on the balance sheet in form of leverage, which could ultimately impact the interest cost or the yield of the bonds. So to remove that effect, we have included entity level variables like debt equity ratio or a debt EBITDA ratio, and try to find out how green score impacts interest expenses. So in all these specifications, we find out that the interest cost reduces as green score increases. Next slide, please. So again, as we say that, an important point also in this specification is that this analysis is done on individual bond level basis. So we have not taken the interest cost faced by the entity as a whole in their profit and loss accounts or balance sheet, but for every single bond issue. We also try to carry a similar analysis on entry level ratios, which we have put in appendix, where we find where we try to find whether whether issuing green bonds has an effect on entity level interest cost as well. But there we don't find out that the results are not so significant to state that higher green score results in lower entity level interest cost. This might be as a result of presence of additional debt or different types of debt on the balance sheet. Next slide, please. So after finding out about savings in interest cost, the next point, which is key, is whether the green bonds are issued at premium. There has been a certain existing literature which states that green bonds have premium in primary as well as secondary markets. So we try to analyze whether greenness of bonds impact green premium as well, premium pricing in primary markets. So we predict that greener bonds would have lower zero volatility spreads, which lead to higher prices in primary markets. So zero volatility spread essentially is the explanatory variable which we have used here. Imran, can you just quickly go to the appendix where we have given the formula for zero volatility spread? So now Z spread is defined as follows. So we can see that the price is as a result of Z spreads over the life of the bond. So in short, if we have a lower Z spread, this implies that the price at the beginning must be higher. This model is essentially derived from the basic discounted cash flow model. And the z-spread, which is reported in the Bloomberg function, is a combined z-spread over the life of the bonds. So, can you go back to the specification? So here we see that there is no significant impact of green score on z-spreads. However, we do find that z-spreads are negatively related to green bonds. Again, we have also included coupon rates as a control variable to ensure that we try to specify, try to isolate the impact of z-spreads on the prices of bonds. So next slide. So after finding out that green bonds have a premium as compared to normal bonds, and that premium is primarily as a result of the interest expenses or lower coupon rates as compared to normal bonds, we find whether green bond, we turn our study to the common issuers. So whether this trend is there for common issuers as well. So our common issuer data set comprises of over 7,000 normal bonds and 1,500 green bonds, which have only those type of companies which have both the green bond issues. So as you can see here, the average yield at issue for normal bonds is higher as compared to green bonds, and the duration of those bonds are pretty much the same. So we can see outright that green bonds have a lower yield as well as a lower coupon rate as compared to normal bonds. So our first specification is for the yield at issue, or annualized yield at issue. So we have both the specification, which has the green instrument as well as the green score. So the first and second equation states that if the bond is green, you have over 36.36% or 36 basis point lower annualized yield at issue as compared to a normal bond. And the specification equation 345 says that as the green score increases, your annualized yield at issue decreases. So we find that for common issuers, we have lower yields for green bonds and lower yields for greener bonds. So both the cases exist here. An important point is that we have included various control variables as well as issuer fixed effects to isolate the individual impact of issuer specific impact in this equation. So next slide. So as continuing our approach, we see that the lower yield is primarily due to the coupon rates. So for green bonds, we have over 0.6% lower coupon rate as compared to normal bonds. Again, coupon rates and green scores are negatively correlated, which implies that as the bonds become more and more green, or as the greenness of the bonds increase, the issuers get a lower coupon rate. The specification, the specification number 3 and 6 in the we see that external certification plays no significant role in determining the coupon rate for the issuers in the primary market, which is consistent with our results in the previous section. Now, now the last part remains on the premium pricing for the green bonds for common issuers. So again, we use zero volatility spread as our explanatory variable, and we find no significant results, which implies that green bonds would have lower coupon rates, but they are not issued at significantly higher prices as compared to normal bonds for common issuers. So just to mention, in equation 1 and 6, though we find that there is a significant coefficient, it kind of goes away when we add more and more control variables to our equation. So next slide. So for common issuers, we reach to a conclusion that yield at issue, zero volatility spread are lower for green bonds as compared to normal bonds. Lower coupon rate and z-spread indicates lower interest cost and premium pricing, but the results for premium pricing are not as promising as lower interest costs. Further, the effect or the coefficients of coupon rates related issue are lower as compared to the previous section. We thought that a possible explanation might be presence of spillover effects of multiple bond issues or green bond issues affecting normal bonds and vice versa. So in this last part, we try to analyze whether issuing green bonds has any continuing effect or spillover effect on future issues of the same issuer. So we develop an equation where we have a term which is kind of interaction of green instrument and previous green, where previous green is basically an indicator to show whether the previous instrument for the same issuer was a green bond or not. So if the previous green is yes, it implies that issuer had the previously issued green bonds. So we focus here mainly on the normal bonds. So green instrument no implies that the instrument in concern is the normal bond, and we see that the interaction terms no into yes has a higher negative coefficient as compared to no into no. This implies that a normal bond would have a lower annualized yield issue if the issuer had issued a green bond previously. That is a premium differential. So the difference between like minus 0.1 and minus 0.8, that is the additional differential negative premium or the spillover effect on normal bonds by issuing a green bond. This effect is also observed in the coupon rates, which will result in savings in interest costs, but is not that significant in the Z spread, which implies that there is no significant difference in the pricing of those issues, pricing of the bonds. So, like for example, we cannot conclude that if the issuer has a green bond, it would have an effect on the prices of future bond issues. So, next slide, please. So I think here we reach the end of our primary results, and the appendix has different explanatory slides like the Z spread and entity level interest ratio analysis. So here we reach the end of our main presentation and would like to open the forum for questions. Mral, if you would like to add anything here.
So thank you, Aditya, for presenting, and thank you everyone for listening to it patiently. We finished 5 minutes before time, and I would like you to pay special attention to the common issuer results that Aditya showed in the towards the latter half of the presentation, because it clearly the takeaway is that when you issue green vis-a-vis normal bonds, you get a discount on your green bond, and that is surprising because we are controlling for the issuer. In that sense, all the effects of corporate governance or internal management or frictions within the firm or entity are taken care of. But even then, there seems to be a premium that green bonds enjoy. And while the important thing is that our measure is able to explain this. So we know that such kind of thing would exist with a normal dummy classification, 0, 1, that is green versus non-green, but our measure is able to also capture this, which we have generated using the different natural language processing, actually using BERT as the natural language processing measure. So yeah, I mean, we would love to hear questions and especially further thoughts on what directions this could take on a more larger or macro perspective, if anyone has any suggestions on that, because right now we feel it's a bit tight in the sense that, yeah, we have a very, very tightly done regressions and specifications, but obviously with respect to the larger picture, how this could be maybe elaborated or built upon to make a holistic paper, which also talks a bit about maybe correlations with the economy or other macroeconomic variables if need be. So that is where we are looking at your help or suggestions or any comments, and feel free to ask any questions. We are ready to be grilled because that's precisely the reason we are here.
Can I maybe jump in and ask a question?
Sure.
Just out of interest, so have you looked at the distribution of this cosine similarities? So I'm just curious, are all of these green bonds, like in the sense, the same green? So do they share, is this cosine similarity distribution, let's say, tight?
Yes, yeah, so I think he did not talk about it, but we have the picture and we also put it out on a poster which we presented on 15th of October. And it's actually not a tight distribution. I think it starts from somewhere around 0.4 and goes till about 0.9, but it tapers off at around 0.8 or something. Yeah. So the takeaway from this is that we will add it in the slides, and possibly when we put the paper so the paper is online in a couple of days, you'll be able to see that figure over there as well. So there is distribution. It is not like it is all bunched together at very tight intervals. The takeaway from that is people who issue green bonds, they write some stuff where they plan to do something with these proceeds in terms of some kind of funding of sustainable projects. That's why 0.4 is probably the lowest that we see. But there are probably limits to trying to make your document too close to the benchmark green bond principles. You cannot just mimic it. As Aditya also mentioned, the only document which has a perfect cosine similarity with the green bond principle is the document itself, and not.
Yeah, exactly. This was basically my interest. If they just mimic.
Yeah, but thanks for that. We have that figure, and probably we should have put it in the presentation. But
and just also out of interest, so among the non-green bonds, or at least the standard bonds, what would be the average such measure? Like, have you just out of interest also calculate the cosine similarities between the non-green bonds to the green disclosure?
For that, we would have to take use of proceeds for the non-green bonds, and that would, I mean, they are definitely anyway talking about non-green bonds. But I get, as a falsification, maybe we could do that. So maybe pick out some of. I don't know, Aditya, if you have some of those prospectus at this point for the non-green.
Non-green bonds. I think we will have to get that data from Bloomberg. But one interesting point here would be what would be the benchmark in this case. Because non-green bonds are like for every possible kind of project which is there, or every possible kind of business. So if we have to create a benchmark to compare the closeness or the cosine similarity with, it's really difficult to isolate a particular benchmark for non-green bonds, because there is no like a standard literature or a standard text available that bonds can be issued only for these 1 to say 50 purposes. So
yes, this makes sense. Yes,
but as falsification, we can still do it, because it's possible that say, forget about non-green bonds. Say I pick anything. I pick the cartoon or like some literature novel, and I run a cosine similarity with the green bond principles. I might start getting some kind of a score over there as well. So I understand your point, and it's something we should do maybe, and put in the appendix as falsification. So thanks for that suggestion.
Yes, I think also we have included that part in the robustness portion of our paper, where we have also taken some user proceeds which are totally from different sources, like which are not related to sustainable finance, and put them through this natural language processing and word encoding, where we find that the score or which is generated for those particular use of proceeds is very low, or is like negligible as compared to the green bond inputs which we have given.
Yes, makes sense. Thank you.
Can I ask one question?
Yes, please.
Yes.
So are these findings geography agnostic or specific to a particular geography? And knowing Indian market for green, I mean, I'm not very sure how many green bonds currently are being issued, but it could be a very huge market. So would these, or could these be extrapolated for Indian scenario as well?
So I'll just answer the first part, and then maybe Aditya can answer the second part about extrapolation. So We use currency fixed effects. So in many ways, these are geography agnostic. We have controlled for all geographical variation using currency fixed effects because the bond can be issued in any currency. So the results are geography agnostic in that sense. Now, Aditya, you can answer the second.
Yeah, also to mention that the sample, the green bond data set contains green bonds from almost all continents and over 60 different countries. So the findings are consistent despite of geographical regions. So it's not like that the green bonds issued in a particular region have these kind of characteristics. And as far as Indian perspective is concerned, we could extrapolate it for India, but there are very few green bonds which are there in Cooper, which we found to be issued from that part of the region. So as more and more issues come up, it might be easier to extrapolate these findings to an Indian scenario.
Thank you. Interesting.
So do we have any more questions?
Any further questions from anyone? I mean, until when do we have time?
We still have time till 5:15.
Okay.
We have still time, so we can wait a little bit for if there are more questions from the audience. But as you like.
Sure. No, I don't have any problem waiting. But there was something with the students you mentioned, but that is after 5:15, or they are there on this meeting itself. Excuse me, Linda?
Yeah, sorry?
Yeah, so you mentioned that some students might join, so will they join at 5:15, that is 5:15, or have they already joined? Or
no, they join for the whole session and can listen, and they can ask questions, and the session will today until 20:15, and then we will close the session.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Yeah.
Any suggestions from anyone? Adrian? I don't know if I'm getting your name right.
Thanks. I had a question during the presentation on, could you go back to your regression on interest rate expense or interest expenses? So just what's the point of this? I didn't get the point of this empirical analysis.
So I'll have to share the presentation again, but I think Aditya can tip in. It's more of a philosophical question, I think, more than that why you.
So we observed that green bonds have a lower annualized yield ratio. So now this could be due to various factors, but if we consider the simplest formula for yield, which is like coupon upon the market price. So we are trying to analyze whether this lower yield is caused due to a lower coupon rate or higher price. So because the interest expense or coupon rate is present in the numerator, lower coupon rate would have a direct impact on the yield.
Interest. So whether whether they issue at a discount.
Yeah.
Or
not specific. So not specifically a discount, but the coupon payments that you have to make on the green instruments could be lower as compared to normal bonds.
Yeah, so you're trying to check where the premium comes from lower coupon or from a discount at issue.
Exactly. So if we are trying to find out whether they are issued at discount, probably the next the second part of our analysis would try to answer that question, where we try to find whether green instruments are issued at a premium or discount as compared to normal bonds. But since the coefficients are not so significant, we cannot give an answer in either side. So they are not like, the Z spreads are not negatively significant or positively significant, which could imply that the green bonds would be either issued at a discount or issued at a premium as compared to normal bonds. Just another point is that this analysis is restricted to the primary markets. So what happens in secondary markets is a totally different story. So there is existing literature based on the analysis of secondary markets for green bonds, where authors have found that green bonds actually yield premium for investors. So we are we focused our study from an issuer perspective.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. In your literature review, I think you forgot, you didn't mention, maybe on purpose, the two papers from Larker and Watts and Flammer, who show that there is no premium actually, because they have they use matching methodology and have quite a tight matching approach, and then finally find no premium. I guess it's covered by.
Can you tell us the name of the papers?
Caroline Flammer.
I think Julian mentioned that.
Yeah, that's the one you mentioned. It was
no, I did not
published in the JFE this year, and a paper in 2020 by Larker and Watts. And Flammer actually uses the matching approach of Larker and Watts. So, and it's quite a, so it's based on a matching methodology, also on the primary market. So trying to match bonds with green bonds with non-green brown counterfactuals from the same issuer, issued more or less the same. So Larker and Watts really look at bonds issued the same day, and they find then, using this very, very tight matching approach, that there is no green bond premium.
Yeah, I just opened up their paper. Thanks.
Yeah, but just as a small add-on to your literature review.
No, that's good. I think it's good to see whether that. And they use nearest neighbor matching, but in a sense, nearest neighbor matching is not very different from using controls. I mean, ultimately, it's essentially about econometrics. Econometricians say it's like more or less the same. But let's see their setting. Maybe their setting is a bit different. I don't know exactly.
Yeah, well, Larker and Watts only look at the U.S. municipal bond market, and Flammer at the U.S. corporate bond market. So the results are a bit different, I guess. Also, as Sue has mentioned before, due to regional differences, I guess.
Yeah.
So,
ours is more of a cross-country thing.
Yeah.
And also we have used the different fixed effects, like industry fixed effects, currency fixed effects, which take care of the.
And you use corporate. You use all kind of issuers, right?
Yeah, all kind
corporate
of
and supranationals.
Yes.
Okay.
So there aren't so many green bonds. That's the problem. The sample is a pretty tight sample, very small sample, I would say. And so that is one of the concerns, and hence doing it at a global level probably makes sense. But yeah, I mean, this is interesting. Let's see. They used the US and they did not find anything in the US, but it seems like there is something when we do like a cross-country thing for some reason.
Yeah.
But thanks for this paper. I'll download this.
Yeah.
Yeah, we still have few minutes for more questions, so last chance to ask the authors about their interesting research. Maybe one question from myself. Did you, when you constructed the Greenness sentiment scores, did you try out different architectures for the neural network, or how did you do that? I think you used LSTMs. Did you also try other networks? So that would be interesting too.
So at this point, what we are using is just the BERT embeddings, and then using the BERT embeddings to create a kind of a sentence vector or like a document vector subsequently, and then use the document vector in conjunction with the document vector for the green bond principles to get a cosine similarity score. So we did compare, again, this is there in the paper, with other algorithms like TF-IDF, which is a bag of words measure, GLOVE and word2vec. These are not exactly bag of words, they are co-occurrence measures, a bit better than bag of words, but BERT actually is contextual, so which is probably the best. So in that sense, BERT architecture is not something which we can change. As I mentioned during the presentation, is that we've not used the last part of BERT, where people use the BERT embeddings to then do some downstream classification or downstream task. We've done that, I think, in one place as robustness, where within the green score, there are many different gradations. Like, I would not like, the names are very colloquial, like less green, more green, very less green, that kind of stuff, basically. But essentially, there are 5-6 different categories within the green score that we've created, that have been created. And then after that, we've done an out of sample kind of analysis on that. And if I am correct, for that, there was a simple, what did you use, Aditya? Just a simple, I think, one-step neural network or something like that.
Yeah, the one-step neural network has been used. Again,
feed forward.
Yes. Yes, again, as an additional robustness, we also used the traditional bag of words approach and word2vec to generate the word embeddings and try to compare the green score, which is generated using these different types of embedding methodologies, and whether that does really make sense. So because we are doing an out of sample prediction, we know what sample or what type of text we are inputting into that algorithm, and the results which we are getting, whether they make any sense or not. So we have, yeah.
But I think we can, for the last step, that is classification, and especially the robustness bit, we can also try some other things, like even a convolutional network, or apart from LSTM, and a simple like feed forward neural net. So maybe we get better results. We didn't try because these are all robustness checks. First, we wanted to like see whether what we are doing makes sense from a finance point of view, and then we can play with these other things as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Really interesting.
Thanks.
Any more questions from the audience? We have a little bit of time, maybe 4 or 5 minutes. But if not, we can also close the session. Let's wait a little bit. Maybe there's a last question.
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so if there is no more question from the audience, I would like to close the session. So thank you very much, Mrinal and Aditya, for your really interesting research and for presenting and answering all the questions. And thank you for participating to everyone. And yeah, have a nice evening. We're looking forward to see you next time at the seminar. Have a nice evening.
Thank you, Linda, and thank you to the CSP team for allowing us to give this opportunity to present. And thanks for Aditya. Thanks to Aditya for presenting. So
yes,
have a good evening, good afternoon, everyone.
thank you all. Yep.